Alright, welcome back, Brush Monkeys. Tom from Flying Monkey Studios here, and this week we're starting in on the painting on camera challenge, is what I'm calling it. Last week we talked about why I don't paint on camera, and all the kind of technical problems and what have you involved in doing that. So this week, like I said, we're starting in on Darius, the wizard here, from Reaper Bones, and we're going to be painting him almost entirely on camera. So I'm a little nervous about this, but I think we'll be okay. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this off, turn my other camera on, and get started on Darius. All right, see ya. All right, so here's my setup. We've got all this, all the paints and everything selected. This week we're doing Darius the Wizard from Reaper Bones, and we're doing it in the traditional method, which is usually base coat, shade wash, and highlight. And I'll get into what all that means here in a little bit for those of you that aren't familiar with the miniature painting hobby. Like I said, this is going to be a little bit of a weird thing for me. Generally speaking, what I do, and I'm hoping the white of the figure doesn't block this out, but what I usually do is start from the inside out, which means I'll start with the skin, this would be his hands and face here, then his inner robes, and then his outer robes, and then probably hair and beard is a little weird thing because I want it to go with the skin, but at the same time it's probably going to be after I finish the outer robes because it kind of overlaps everything. But anyway, we're going to start with the skin, and for the skin I'm using Vallejo Model Color Medium Flesh Tone, shade washed with Reichland Flesh Shade, and then a mix of basic skin tone and medium flesh tone, and then a highlight of Reaper Master Series Fair Skin, because you know wizards spend most of their day indoors and don't get out a whole lot. Like I said, there's not a whole lot of skin on this guy, so I'm not anticipating this taking a whole lot of time, so I'm not going to do, for the most part for this episode, I'm going to be painting on the figure a little spot, and then you know basically just show you the mechanics of it, and then we'll cut away where I can finish all of that color, and then we'll come back to see how it looks. So hopefully I can get this to actually zoom in and I can paint this guy. Now normally you can see how much paint I've got on that brush. That's a little bit more than I need, so I use my thumbnail here as a palette. Just kind of wipe off the excess until I've got about that much paint on there, and then for these initial base coats, I'm not overly concerned with being too neat about it. This is really kind of messing with my depth perception doing this on camera. Also, this is a lot darker looking on camera than it is in person, which is kind of weird. So the colors aren't necessarily true on camera. But one of the great things about working with acrylic paints is that they're water-based, and therefore they dry out pretty quick. So by the time I finish with the hands here, the face will be dry and I can shade wash it. And talking about what I'm doing kind of helps too. So for the most part in these initial stages, it's not necessary to be overly neat, because you're going to go back over all of this with multiple layers of paint, but also you're going to be painting the other stuff around it too. And this is proving every bit as difficult as I thought it was going to be to keep this on camera, because I keep wanting to move it around. Okay, so there's all those fingers. There we go. Okay. Alright. Yeah, he's looking a little orange, kind of Trumpish orange there. And one good thing about doing this on camera is I can see when I've missed spaces, like his wrist here. All right. Okay. So there's that. Now the shade wash. What this does is Raglan Flesh Shade. This is, as you can see, hopefully you can see that. It's quite a bit thinner paint. It's almost watery. I'm going to back out here a little bit. Show you the dry. Okay, so what we have here is a wet palette, which means this sponge, there's a sponge and then there's a piece of paper on top, and the sponge has water in it, and that's keeping that paint wet on there. This is what we call a dry palette, which is a more traditional palette where you just put the paint on it and eventually it'll dry up. But I like to use the dry palette for washes, because if you put the washes on the wet palette, they tend to thin out too much. Whereas dry palette, they stay dry for about as long as you want them to. Because this is kind of messing with my depth perception, I'm going to go ahead and put my magnifiers on, because I'm kind of looking up over the top of the camera at this guy more often than not. Because the camera really is messing with my depth perception. But there we go, just get a little bit there. And then, again, I like to brush the excess off on my finger here. Okay. And zoom back in on his face. Now what the shade wash does is it flows into all the little crevices and whatnot and brings out all that detail in the face. You can see it kind of outlined his face, outlined his beard, and it seems like it's a lot, but it'll look right once it's settled in there. And this will make his skin look quite a bit darker too at first. But that's why we go back over with the layers and the highlights afterwards. This is so hard to keep this on camera. This is why I hardly ever do it this way. This is so much harder than I thought it was going to be. As I'm painting this on camera, I'm kind of trying to keep the figure on camera and look down over the top of the camera at what I'm actually painting. And sometimes I'm successful, sometimes I'm not. The figure actually has to be lower than I'm used to get it where I need it to be. But there you go. There's a shade wash. And then you can see how it's kind of brought out that detail in his hands. You can see all the separation of his fingers, the lines on the back of his hands there, lines of his face and his nose and everything. The other cool thing you can do with shade wash, and you'll see this when I do the highlights, is after I've highlighted the face, for the most part the face is going to be highlighted with like right on the nose there and these two cheekbones, because that's really all that's showing on there. You can't really even see his mouth. Alright, so once I've done all that, I may go back with the shade wash after I've done the final highlights and highlighted the skin and the nose and everything, and then I'll go back with the shade wash and just do the tip of his nose, so he's got that kind of ruddy, I drink too much kind of look to his nose. And again, this doesn't look like much now, but we're just getting started. So that's skin washing so far. Alright, so I'm going to take a break here and let that dry, and then when we come back we'll do the layers and the highlights. and that'll kind of give you an idea of what we're doing. For the rest of the figure, I'm going to focus mostly on, I'll show you a little bit of what I'm doing. Like when we go to do the hair and the beard, I'll put a little bit of paint on there and then say, okay, I'm going to go do the whole guy. I'll take a break, come back, and you'll see it finished, all right? All right, so I'm going to take a break, let the shade wash dry. That should take about, for the Citadel shades, it takes about a half an hour or so for the paint to dry. For things like the contrast paints, it takes about 45 minutes to an hour to fully dry. But we'll get into that next week. So, for right now, thanks. I'll be right back. Bye. All right, I'm back, and I've let the shade wash dry for about half an hour, so it's pretty well dried. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next step, which is layering it. And by layering, I mean I'm going to take this basic skin tone, mix it with a little bit of the original skin tone, and we're just going to hit the highlights of his face here. The basic skin tone from Vallejo is a little bit yellowish in color, so this is going to look a little bit weird, but overall I think it'll work out. Alright, so again, just get a little bit on the brush here, thumbnail palette. Now normally when you're highlighting a face, let's see if I can get this guy to zoom in here. Okay. Normally when you're highlighting a face, you're focusing on the nose, right there, the cheeks, the eyebrows, forehead, every place that the light is going to hit. This guy doesn't have a whole lot of his face exposed, so you're going to end up with something kind of like that. Which again looks kind of weird right now, but sorry, I'm so hard trying to keep this on camera. Okay, so end up like that. Now you may be wondering why we bothered to paint a dark color on the skin and then do the shade wash to make it even darker, and then we come back in with this light color and lighten it up when we could have just painted it this color in the first place. Well, this gives, what we're doing is we're giving depth to the skin for one thing, and for another, your skin is a lot of different colors for one thing, so there we go. Gives depth to the skin, also brings out those details, makes them stand out a little more. You can see how that looks now. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this off and do his hands, and then we'll come back and see how he looks, okay? And this is pretty much how we're going to be doing the rest of this video. Alright, we are back, and as you can see, I've got the skin all layered up with hands, and now you can see how that allows the shadows to still show, and all the little lines and whatnot in his hands and face to show out, and he looks pretty good. Now, like I said, you may be wondering why we're doing multiple layers of this, because I'm about to do another layer for the highlights of the pale flesh. So again, get a little blob of paint on you. Do the thumbnail thing here. And just going to hit those highlights. So again, now this one I'm not looking to cover the entire area that we painted before. I'm just literally hitting the highlights. The top of the cheeks, into the nose. There we go, just like that. Same with the fingers. I'm just gonna the highlights here. Hopefully Hopefully this is showing up on camera. And the reason we're doing layers like this is because your skin is semi-translucent. It shows a lot of there's a lot of stuff going on there, and most of what we consider to be our skin color is actually things like your very little of it is actually your skin. A lot of it is your blood in your hands. Underneath the skin, you're seeing the blood in your veins, things like that. But you have such tiny little blood vessels that to a certain degree they're almost microscopic. They're only a little bit bigger than the cells needed to pass through them. And so, but they cover everything, so it tends to create this kind of semi-tan color, which is really kind of a filtered red and blue. And you want that to show through on your miniatures. So if you do skin tones and layers like this, then you get that nice little layering of skin. Now, like I said, what I was going to do with the I wanted his nose to be a little reddy, kind of I drink too much sort of red color. So I'm going to take a little bit of the Reikland flesh tone that I used before and just a drop of water, just enough to thin it down a little bit, just so it's not as thick as it was. Okay, get that nice little watery consistency there, and then we're going to just paint it right on the end of his nose. I know it seems weird to do all that layering and then come right back to the flesh shade, but as you can see, it makes his nose a little more red, gives him that kind of ruddy. I've had a few too many kind of, which, you know, wizard's drink. It happens. Alright, now, you may also notice around his eyes, he's got nice deep shadows there, but he's also got very prominently sculpted eyeballs. And I suck at painting eyes. I did a whole video last week about why I don't paint eyes. But I'm going to paint this guy's eyes. I've got model color ivory and Vallejo game color black for the pupil. And I'm going to be using a brush that I keep basically just for this. On the rare occasions that I actually paint eyes, this is a Royal & Langnickel, and it's a 30-aught brush. So it's incredibly tiny little tip on the end there. I am not going to do this on camera, so I'm going to shut this off, paint the white, and then we'll come back and take a look at it before I do the pupil. Okay, be right back. Alright, I realized as I went in on this with the brush and the magnifiers on that this almost would have been easier to do with the camera and the zoom, because the zoom gets so much better detail than what I can get from my piss poor eyesight. But ideally, you saw where those sculpted eyeballs were. You just want to put a little line of ivory. You don't want to use white, because your eyes aren't actually white. Your eyes are just off-white. So use ivory or an off-white eggshell kind of color, something like that, to put that little line down the middle of all that shading. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this black and put just a tiny dot, ideally in the middle of both of those, but really it's going to be a little bit off to the side, because he's going to be looking at you like that as he's casting the spell, so it's going to be a little off center. Again, not going to try this on camera. There's a limit to what I will and will not try on camera. Mostly because I cannot keep this centered up, but you just want a little bit of paint on the brush, real thin. Real thin. Okay, I'm going to turn this off and do the eye, and then I'll come back. Alright. Alright, while these aren't the best eyes I've ever painted, I'm not disgusted with them, so that's accomplishing something. You can still see the whites around them. You can kind of see how the dot looks on them. That kind of almost cartoonish anime looking eyes is why I don't paint eyes very often. But that did not turn out horrible. I've seen better. I've done a whole lot worse. So that's painting the skin. All right. So the next step, the next layer would be the inner robes here. Like I said, I'm going to paint everything and then go back and paint the hair and beard and everything because it touches over everything else. But back out of this. Next we're going to get into, I had to add a color because I had the intention of doing the outer robes in ultramarine blue. I was going to do the inner robes with Andorran blue and a shade wash of Drakenhof Nightshade, and then a highlight of High Elf blue, and we'll get into all that. And then I think I was going to do the belt there, his belt sash and his hat rim with the Andorran blue, highlighted with Andorran blue after it's been shade washed. But then I realized that he's got these inner robes here, and then he's got outer robes, which will be the ultramarine blue, and then he's got this cloak, which is a whole different animal. And so for the cloak, I picked this Vallejo Game Color Imperial Blue, which is darker than all of it. So it should be light to dark coming out from the inside. So anyway, to start with, we're going to painting the inner robes. We're going to start with Reaper Master Series Andorran Blue. It's really nice kind of, this is sort of a medium blue color, but it's also lighter than most of the other blues I have. So it can be used as both base and highlight after you've shade washed it. It'll darken down with the shade wash, obviously, but we don't need that 30-aught anymore. Okay, and paint palette. I always end up with paint all over my palette. And with this, like I said, since we're going to be shade washing it, you can be a little bit sloppy. Almost everything you do, you can be a little bit messy with it because you're going to go back over it and neaten things up a little bit. Reaper Master Series paints are really kind of thin, so they benefit from a lot of different, or not a lot of different, but a lot of layers. You see how thin that's going on. I could probably stand to shake that up a little bit more. But that's really all that's involved. You just brush the paint on there. Bear with me a second. That noise you're hearing in the background is my vortex mixer, and that helps mix up my paint without having to do that nonsense with it. Although sometimes it helps to do that too. Hopefully it comes out a little thicker after you shake it up a little bit. Okay. Well, that's a little better. Let's try that. Oops. Painting off camera again. And this is largely why I advocate painting from the inside out. Because like I said, you're going to be a little messy. It's going to be a little bit sloppy in places, but you'll also clean that up as you go. So, like right here where it's kind of gone over the outer robe a little bit, when I paint the darker color on the outer robe, that'll fix that.
Alright, so there we go. Like I said, paint a few layers on there. You just go back over the same place you painted already, and it darkens it down a little bit. Makes it more opaque. So that helps. And there you go. That's the there's your inner robes painted. You know, like I said, with each subsequent layer you paint, with pretty much everything you paint, there's going to be a little bit of dry time involved in it. So I'm going to take another break, let that dry. We'll come back and do the outer, his outer robes, and that'll be the majority of the blue on there. That'll be that ultramarine blue. Actually, I take that back. No, when we come back, we're going to shade wash this Andorran blue, and then we're going to highlight it. Then we'll do the outer robes. Okay. So, yeah, that's going to look pretty spiff when we're done. See you soon. Alright, so our inner robes have dried, and now we can shade wash them. There's two different ways we can go about this, because I'm going to use the same Drakenhof Nightshade on the outer robes once we paint that. So we can either, when you're painting your miniatures, you can either paint the outer robes and then shade wash everything, or you can just do it like I'm doing. I'm just going to shade wash the inner robes. Then when we go to shade wash the outer robes, you'll already kind of know what I'm talking about. So, and this is done just like we did with the flesh tone shade. Just going to put a couple of drops on our dry palette. And normally with the shade wash, you want to use a slightly larger brush than you use for your regular painting, but since it's such a small area, I'm just going to use the same size brush. And again, you just kind of paint it on there. It flows into the crevices and shades it up all nice. Now the shade washes will also darken the overall tint of the color, so it'll come out looking darker blue, which is why we're highlighting it with a lighter blue. It'll bring that, kind of bring that original color back in the highlights. If you ever get a little too much in a space like right there, you just clean off your brush and wick it back out, and there you go. It's all nice and shade washed. Like I said, we're going to do that same thing with the outer robes, but you'll see that when we get to it. I'll do like I've been saying, and you know, just say, okay, now I'm going to shade wash the outer robes, cut, and I'll come back and you'll see what it looks like. So that's what that looks like. Now, as usual, we let that dry, and then we'll come back and hit it with the highlights of High Elf Blue. This is this one's kind of a weird color because this is an old Citadel color that was fortunately still good. Just got to mix it up. It's kind of trying to go bad because it's over 40 years old. Excuse me, 30 years old. But I've got an agitator ball in there, and it's still got a little bit of life to it, so I'm going to use it while I can. In the meantime, I was going to do the edge of his hat in. See what I've got here. Sorry, I'm consulting my Ultimate Blues recipe. Okay. So we're doing the Andorran blue on the inner robes and highlighting with High Elf blue. The outer robes we're doing with ultramarine blue and highlighting with the Andorran blue. So, since I've got some of the Andorran blue left still, I'm going to do the trim in his hat here in the Andorran blue. So, just because it doesn't touch anything else, and we're eventually going to need to paint it that way anyway. So So we're just painting this part here. Now there's no folds in this hat brim, so it's not going to be necessary to shade wash it necessarily. It's going to get shade washed when I do the hat, but that's mostly going to be to pick out the space between the rim of the hat and the peak of the hat. Okay. You see it's got a very pronounced lip around the edge of this hat. Sorry. Again, trying to paint this and keep it on camera at the same time, it's not working out. And this is kind of one of the reasons why I was holding off painting the hair and eyebrows, because you can see how that's kind of overlapped the hat. So there you go. Alright, so now I'm going to take another break and let this shade wash dry, and when we come back we'll highlight the inner robes and then we'll look at painting the outer robes. Okay? We'll see you soon. Bye. Alright, we're back, and as you can see the shade wash has kind of darkened everything and brought it down to a nice deep blue. So now we're going to highlight it, and to do that we just look, you see all these little folds here? We're basically just going to run that layer color right along that, and that dried on my brush while I was talking about it. The advantage of acrylic paints is that they dry really quick. The disadvantage of acrylic paints sometimes is that they dry really quick. Let's try that again. There we go. Now we're getting some highlights on there. Okay, see? That just brought out all those little neat little folds. And this can really be done like two ways. The way I'm doing it is kind of a layering method. The other way is a dry brush method, where you take your dry out, try to get as much paint as you can off your brush, then you go in and just kind of drag it along the textures like that, and you get kind of a built-in highlight that way. And that could be a lot faster. So there you go, that's really all that's involved in highlighting it. So, during the break I went ahead and shade washed his hat rim too. And you can just do the same thing on that. It's not, there's not as many, there's no folds in it or anything, so it's not going to be as much texture with this. But you can just give it a little bit of highlight right along the edge there. The main thing is to give it some contrast between the hat rim and the peak of the hat, so it's not all just monochromatic one color kind of thing. You've got different layers, different shades of blue going on in there. Okay. This one almost did it itself. Now, if this seems kind of time consuming and tedious, it sort of is, but you get good results that way, and it looks really nice. Now, the Next week will go by quite a bit faster because it's the contrast method, and the contrast method is cool because the paints are formulated in such a way that the base coat, shade wash, and highlight is all one step, and it goes by a lot faster that way. So there's your hat brim and inner robes done. So now we're going to take the ultramarine blue here and start in on the outer robes. Sorry for jiggling the camera. It's attached to my chair, so anytime I move, then the camera moves. Doing the outer robes is the same as everything else we've been doing. Just take a little bit of paint, brush off the excess on your palette, and take it to the miniature. Keep having to zoom in because I don't have my magnifiers on me. But now, right in here is where it gets tricky, because you see where I've got the inside edge of this robe kind of butts up against the inside edge of the inner robe. So you want to be careful about that. Now we're starting to kind of get into the area where you start cleaning up your previous messiness, but at the same time you kind of have to be careful with what you're doing. So get that outer robe lined on there. And it's basically just going to look like this. And we're going to continue along all the outside robe, and then we'll let that dry. So I'm going to go ahead and shut this off, finish this up, and then we'll come back and see how he looks before we move on to shade washing the outer robe. Alright, see you soon. Bye. Alright, so now you can see I've got his outer robes painted blue, and he's really starting to come together as a blue wizard now. And you can still see there's a difference between the outer blue and the inner blue. And you'll still see that difference even after we shade wash and highlight the outer blue. Like the shade wash will darken that outer blue down a little bit. The inner blue, even though it's the same base color, or the highlight, even though it's the same base color as the inner blue, will still look like a different tone than what we used there, because that tone's been darkened down and highlighted with yet another color. So that's how that goes. Yeah. So the blue obviously is still a little bit wet in places, so I'm going to let that dry, and then when we come back we're going to do his cloak in the game color Imperial blue, and then we'll shade wash the inner robes and the cloak all together rather than do separate layers of Drakenhof Nightshade between the two. And then you'll see this really starting to come together. So yeah, he's looking pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and stop here and let that dry, and then when we come back we'll start in on his cloak. Alright, see you soon. Alright, we're back, and it looks like the outer robes have dried sufficiently, so we're going to go ahead and do the cloak now. And I said I was going to do the cloak in a very dark blue, and this is done pretty much the same way as everything else. You just pay attention to the inside of it where it comes up against another color, but for the most part you just got some paint on your brush it on. Maybe get a little more paint on your brush than that. Not that much. And just continue on like that. So I'm going to go ahead and shut this off and finish up the robe. We're going to do the shade washing of the cloak and the inner robe both together, so you don't have a separate puddle of Drakenhof Nightshade. It's kind of wasteful to do it that way. So yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and finish this up, and then I'll do the shade washing all at once. Alright, I'll see you in a bit. Alright, as you can see, I've got the base coats done on his inner robe here, or his outer robe, excuse me, and his cloak. It looks really nice and dark there. A couple little places I need to touch up with the excuse me, with the paint. It didn't quite cover. Bear with me a second. Sometimes paint kind of retracts a little bit. It shrinks as it there we go. There we go. Okay. So now we're going to go ahead and shade wash the guy, and yeah, even those places I just touched up, it'll dry fast enough. And we're going to shade wash both the outer robe and the cloak with the same Drakenhof nightshade that I used on the inner robes, so that'll kind of bring it all together here. And you'll notice I'm using a much larger brush. I'm using an old Citadel base coat brush for this because don't really need to be terribly neat about this. Just need to, and it's fairly large flat areas of color that you're putting down, so just really only need to be careful where it comes close to another color. That's really all we're doing, just kind of putting that on there. And you can see how you see before shade wash versus after shade wash, how that shade wash just kind of flows down into the crevices and shadows. Duh. And that's how we get our shadows on this guy. Then later we'll go back and highlight all this, and you'll start to see a real difference in how he looks at that point. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and pause here and do all that, and then we'll come back and see how he looks when he's all shaded up. Alright, see you soon. Alright, brush monkey, so now you can see that shade wash has darkened down the outer robes and the cloak really nicely. So now we're just going to layer them back up with the same colors we used for the base colors. So it's that is a mess. Why is that not? Bear with me just a second. Color is being a little bit of a pain. Okay. Okay, sorry, I'm a little bit lost here as to exactly which colors I'm using because none of these look right. That looks way too light for that color. So we're just going to go back to, let's see, ultramarine blue. That's the one I use for the base. If it's been a couple of days since you painted, then sometimes your colors can look off a bit. There we go, that's what happened. Okay, now I'm back on track. Sorry. There we go, okay. That's better, there we go. Alright, now I know what I'm doing with myself. This is one of those days. Alright, so to layer it back up, we're just doing along the edges, not quite all the way down into the crevices, but enough to bring that original color back out. And we're still leaving the shadows in there. Just like that. Sometimes you got to turn it to get a different angle. See, that leaves all those nice deep shadows in there, but it also brings the original color back up to where it should be and makes more of a differentiation between not only the shadow and the original color, but also between the different shades of blue. Like you can kind of see where the outer robe, the cloak, and the outer robe are two different shades of blue, but they look really close. But when you blend them like this, when you go back over and bring out all those highlights, it makes that difference in color a little more obvious. Also makes those shadows stick out a little bit more. See? So, okay. So I'm going to go ahead and shut this off and go do that all the way around both these colors. And then we'll come back and take a look at them and start it on his book. Alright? See you soon. Bye. Alright, so now our guy's all nice and highlighted and layered up. He looks really good. So I know I said I was going to talk about the book next, but I'm actually going to do the beard next. For that, we're going to use Dawnstone as the base for his hair and beard, and then we're going to shade wash that with Nuln Oil, and then we're going to dry brush it with a heavy dry brush of Dawnstone Dry, and then a light dry brush of Longbeard Gray. And this is not terribly different from anything else we've done in this video so far, so I'm not going to do a whole lot of it on camera. You get the basic idea of putting down base coats and layers and things like that. Sometimes you get paint dried up in the tip there, and that's what helps to have a little stick pin like this. Just stick it down in there. I've got a little spot on my paint station where I've got a cork glued down there, and I just stick the little stick pin in that. Keeps it where I can get at it. Okay. Now the hair and beard are a little bit trickier than other stuff we've done, just because there's so much around it that's already painted. So you kind of have to be a little bit careful. I'm going to try to zoom in a little bit here so hopefully I can see better. And you just very carefully paint around what you've already painted. I like to kind of outline it first and go over the closest to where I've already painted stuff, like that. Yeah, try to keep it on camera. This is one of those stages where you kind of really have to be careful about what you're doing, because now you're cleaning up the mess of a lot of what you weren't careful about earlier. Remember all those times in the video I said, yeah, you don't really have to be that careful about it because we're going to clean it up later. Well, now it's later. Okay. you get the idea. You just continue around until all that's painted. I'm going to go ahead and shut this off and finish it and shade wash it, and then we'll come back and do the dry brushing. Alright, see you soon. Alright, brush monkeys, we're back, and as you can see, I've got his beard base coated, beard and hair, base coated and shade washed with the Nuln Oil, and it looks pretty good. Now we're going to dry brush it with the Dawnstone dry brush. Now normally with the dry brush, I'd use a brush like this, okay, but because that's such a kind of a confined area, I'm going to use a slightly smaller brush. I'm going to use this little one here, and it's kind of angled at the tip. This is basically just a, see if I hold that right side up, it might be easier to read, a winged liner brush from Sigma. This is a makeup brush that I got at Beauty Brands, I think. And all we do, dry brush, is we get a little bit of this dry paint. You can see how it's a lot thicker than regular paint. Get that on our brush, and then see, we take it over here to the paper towel and try to brush most of it off until only a very little bit is left on the brush. Okay. And then we zoom in on our figure here. We just kind of brush it across the lines of the figure, and you can see where that leaves a little bit of paint on the figure itself, and it picks out all that little detail of the hair and the beard. There we go. That brings out that Dawnstone base coat again. So now what we're going to do is we're going to repeat that process, but we're going to do it with this Longbeard gray, which is a much lighter gray. And this is also kind of a thicker dry brush, so it takes a little more to get some on there. Okay. Wipe it off with a paper towel. Wipey. And this stuff brings out the highlights in that beard. There you go. Look at that. Brings back that kind of snowy old man kind of gray to it. Don't forget his eyebrows. So there you go. That's what he looks like now. Pretty slick, huh? Alright, so for the next part, we're going to do his book. And the book I'm going to do mostly off camera because there's no big surprises in the book. We're going to do the book cover in Vallejo Model Color Hull Red. It's a nice dark brownish red. Looks good for kind of reddish leather. We're going to base the pages in Ashabti Bone. Then we'll shade wash them in Agrax Earthshade and layer them in Screaming Skull. The base coat shade wash highlight part we've done on just about every other part of this guy. It's no big surprises. There's nothing really to be gained here from doing it all on camera. So I'm going to do it off camera, and then we'll come back and take a look at the finished thing, and I'll go into how to do the writing on the pages and what these pens are for here. Okay? So I will see you soon. Bye. Alright, we're back, and we've got the book all painted up. And as you can see, I've gone ahead and done the base too, because again, that wasn't anything that was any big surprises. It was just, you know, basing the green, dry brushing with the niblet green, and then painting the base band. So, not anything we haven't covered elsewhere in the video. So, for right now, we're going to get into how to paint the lettering on the book. And this is why I've got these two Micron pens. And I've got two of them because generally speaking, in illuminated manuscripts, if you look at medieval books, there's usually what's called an illuminated letter, where it's a letter that's the capital letter at the start of the book or the start of the page is usually really fancy, really elaborate, and kind of goes off into the borders and things like that. And the rest of the page is just kind of lettered. So that's what we're kind of going to do here. Except the key is you don't necessarily need to make it legible. You don't have to read this book. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go kind of like that. Right, and then we're going to carry that into the borders. This part is really freaking hard to do on camera. And we're just going to put like a little squiggle in there to represent the letter itself. So that's all it's got to look like, okay? And then the rest of it, a lot of people will tell you to use black. I like to use brown on my letters because old books, the lettering is kind of faded and isn't real legible. Or not necessarily legible, but it's faded. It's not stark black writing like it was when it was brand new. So you just do little squiggles like that. Like I said, you're not actually trying to make a book you can full on read. But you do kind of want it to look like words. Just like that. Now obviously that doesn't look that great here, but from this distance, you know, tabletop distance, look at that. That looks pretty spiff, right? Come on, there we go. And we're going to do that on both sides here. And you can get different colors of micron pens. Like I gave some serious thought to going out and getting green and red pens so that this little squiggle in the border would kind of look like vines. And you can get like a red pen and do sort of pages out of the Necronomicon thing if you want. So there you go. That's all that's got to look like. And from a tabletop standard, that will look pretty good. Again, put the figure down. From back here, look at that. That looks like writing. That looks pretty slick. So that's all it is. You use just micron pens to do your different colors of writing on the book. So the only thing left to do now, since we've done the base and done the base band, is to use the Army Painter Anti-Shine here to matte seal it. For that, I'm going to need to go over to what passes for my spray booth. So I'm going to pause here and go do that. Be right back. Alright, so this is what passes for my spray booth, and it's basically an old cardboard box that's just designed to keep it from overspraying onto everything else too much. So once we're over here, you just give your can a good shake. I did most of that off camera because it's loud as all get out, and it's kind of starting to rattle around, so I might run out of this stuff. But basically, I like to start spraying off the figure. Wait, hold on. All right, technical issues. Hold on. Alright, so remember way back when I said it sounded like that can was running a little empty? Turns out it was dead empty. Had to get a new can. So, fortunately I was somewhat prepared for that. Alright, so I like to, there we go. I like to spray a little bit off the figure and then just kind of spray back and forth in passes. That, going. And you want to keep it fairly far away from the figure, but that's really all there is to it. Now, like I said, that looks pretty shiny because it's wet. The great thing about the Army Painter Anti-Shine is this stuff will dry really fast. Now, normally when I'm doing this, you want to do this in a fairly well ventilated area. My shop is not, but I've gotten so used to breathing the fumes that it really doesn't do anything for me anymore. However, when my wife's working during the week, she works in the next room over and doesn't like me doing this in the shop because she can smell it over there. So I usually take it up to the garage, spray it there, come back. By the time I get back, the figure's dry. So because I did it here, the figure is not quite dry. It's going to take a little bit to dry out, and so we're going to take a little break, let that dry, and then we'll come back and look at the finished figure. All right, see you soon. All right, brush monkeys, there he is, our finished Darius the Wizard, painted in the traditional style of base coat, shade wash, and highlights. I think he looks really good. Still looks like the wizard from Disney's Sword in the Stone to me. Looks like Merlin. Next week we'll be painting the same guy in the contrast style, using mostly contrast paints. Some of the techniques will be a little bit similar to what we do here, using the micron pens for the book, for example, painting his eyes, dry brushing the base, etc. Some of them will be new for the contrast. The contrast paint video will be quite a bit faster because the base coat, shade wash, and highlight is all one paint with the contrast range. But we'll get into that next week. For right now, traditional Darius looks pretty good, and we're going to call him done. So, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next week. Hey Brush Monkeys, Tom from Flying Monkey Studios here. If you like what you see, click like down below. If you want to be notified when new videos come out, click subscribe. And in the meantime, if you want to see how to add one of the miniatures that we've painted on this channel to your own collection, check out our Instagram, Tumblr, and Patreon sites. If you want to support us in doing what we do, check out my Patreon site, check out my merch store at storefrontier.com/flymonkeystudios. You can get t-shirts, sweatshirts, long sleeve shirts, hoodies, all kinds of stuff there. Go check that out. And in the meantime, thanks for watching, and I will see you next week. Bye.